Welcome.
The Pathology Innovation Collaborative Community is a regulatory science initiative that aims to facilitate innovations in pathology, as well as advance safety and effectiveness evaluation. The PI Collaborative Community aims to harmonise approaches to speed delivery to patients through collaboration in the pre-competitive space. The PIcc is open to all stakeholders, public or private, including but not limited to academia, industry, healthcare providers, patients, and advocacy groups. Meetings of this kind are an example of lawful activity under federal antitrust law because the focus of the meeting is on government action or policy, including the industry's responses or positions taken with respect thereto. However, antitrust monitoring is needed for companies' own protection, since they are direct competitors meeting together. These meetings need to stay within protected subject matters and need to be monitored so that they do not stray off into inappropriate areas, such as pricing and price terms, sales and service territories for particular products, customers and customer territories, each company's individual decisions regarding selection of suppliers or customers, marketing plans and especially future marketing plans or new product offerings, other proprietary or competitively sensitive information. Today's meeting will follow the written agenda, and there will be no discussion of pricing or other prohibited topics. If the discussion veers into those topics, we will terminate the discussion. If you have any questions or concerns about the propriety of the discussion, please raise it immediately, and we will take a break to determine how best to proceed. The Medical Device Innovation Consortium acts as the formal convener, and we will follow their conflict of interest policy. For additional information, we defer to our Code of Conduct and our website, www.pathologyinnovationcc.org. We look forward to moving the field forward.
So, welcome everybody to the November Steering Committee of the Pathology Innovation Collaborative Community, your alliance for digital pathology. It's a pleasure to be here. Let me just see if I can start sharing the screen here. And does that work? Perfect. So we have a packed agenda, and for everyone who already feeling festive, please get your favorite drink ready, so in the end we can maybe raise a glass on the Thanksgiving. All right, so I think we can get started here. So not quite sure whether everyone is on, because I think Laura and Joe may be arriving a bit late. This was a proposal for a panel submission. Maybe we have to come back to that in a little bit, because I think Laura and Joe are both in other meetings, so we give them a few minutes. So Ola, please keep reminding me that I come back to this topic. The second one, which I can definitely talk or start talking about, relates to the so-called CLIA waiver for digital pathology under the public health emergency. And I see Joe is just coming on. So basically, one of the first things that we have contributed with PIcc at the time it was called the Alliance was a letter outlining how helpful it would be to use digital pathology during the public health emergency. And we drafted a letter signed by many of the associations. And one of the things that is happening right now is, of course, the course of history on when the public health emergency will end and whether or not, once the president declares that over, what would happen with the CLIA waiver. So what we discussed and I wanted to discuss it with this group, is a proposal for 3 meets to quickly discuss what's going on. First, of course, the regulatory context, what's going on, what are the changes. A second is a review of the current practice, what are people doing right now? Are people really using this or not? And then, of course, a future state, meaning what do we want in terms of, changes? Should we just make the changes that are currently happening temporarily permanent, or do we want to, change that a little bit? So there's, of course, many topics related to this, but I just wanted to open it up for discussion. And I see Joe is on. Joe, do you want to say a few words here?
Actually, I'll wait for the discussion because if those of us who have been on the API listserv, it's been blown up. And so there's a lot of things to contribute to this, but let me hold off any thoughts for now.
So, what do people think? I mean, we have officially written a letter before. We do have some context to CMS. Of course, there's many opinions. There's differences from industry, from academia, from practitioners, from patients, right? So the question is whether, at the most simple level, do we want to discuss this in separate meetings, possibly a project to write a position letter or a position paper? I think we had pretty good resonance with Nature Medicine about, one of these similar projects where we just wanted to argue that, that sometimes regular science can answer important questions. I think one of the points that we argued in our initial letter, and we can share that with the group, was that we will create real-world evidence of what digital pathology can contribute. So part of that could be that we, pool some of our data and really concretely illustrate what's happening. So that would probably be mostly in that, review of current practice. I know some people just take home slides and review them at home at the microscope. Some people sign out remotely. Some people convert it completely digital. So I think it's kind of a call. What do people think? Comments? Come on, guys. It's not Thanksgiving yet.
This can be a big rabbit hole. I think we probably should have it over several sessions because it's not easy. There's a lot of things I haven't disentangled. There was a recent thread from Johnson. Was it John? Maybe it was John, or I can't remember. In terms of credentialing versus accreditation versus validation, these are definitions that I didn't even try to wrap my head around. And this is all going to play in terms of what is the scope for CMS versus CAP versus, just the practice of medicine. And I think we have to disentangle these concepts and be able to disentangle and then reassemble for whichever applies, and then apply it in the framework of telepathology or digital sign out, or even practicing remotely. And there was a lot of stuff just thrown in within the last 2 days. And I think 1 hour, probably, we're not going to solve something that has been with us for the last 20 years in just one session. So that's my take.
No, so I think part of it is, regulatory clarity, right? We have a mission to, help people understand what this means. For example, one of the key concepts under the current waiver, I would call it temporary regulatory deviation is probably the more precise term, is that during an audit, certain things would not be raised. That is a fundamental difference from changing, the law. So that's, if you're willing to do validation, you can fulfill many of the regulatory requirements. But what you mentioned, Joe, whether you consider yourself competent of doing it versus credentialed versus accredited versus auditable, those are things that I believe many practicing pathologists are not really encountering unless there's a rule set for it. And, from an industry perspective, of course, everyone will likely say, let's adopt digital pathology, which I think we share as an interest. But the complexities on the regulatory side are probably not, easily overcome unless there is some sort of blue book or, like a rule set, or at least a proposal. So, other comments?
Are very afraid of, but it seems from the API listserv that we should look at some way to either clarify or revise. I use the word clarify because it's a little bit softer. There's certain vagaries that might need a little more clarification. Like, for instance, if you're going to do a certain fraction remotely, everybody's been assuming 10%, but that number's never been established. And so that's an area of clarification, things like that. And there are probably a lot of different phrasing in the regs that allow us to clarify a little further without actually changing the full-blown wording and scope of things. And so, even for baby steps, that's actually progress.
So there's a question from Niels. Would review of current practice, so the second session, be most naturally covered by a CAP survey? I very much assume so. The problem is that the survey is usually passive, and once the results are out there, I think the discussion of what does that mean is usually not quite as active. So what we wanted to do is just here's some practical examples where you can actually directly ask, like, how did you do this or what happened? And I think these are complementary. I don't know, we don't want to, interfere with anyone's survey or ongoing operations. This was just sort of an idea to capture some of the practical hurdles and possibly also risks, because admitting that, in a survey is something different than, talking about it, what people have encountered during the rollout, if they've done so. Doug, do you have a comment or?
Oh, yeah, sorry. I was just pasting an article that maybe there's some authors of the article on here, but if you're not aware, it's certainly one. Yeah, there you go. They did a nice job of framing, what they did and how they did it. So,
oh, thanks. I am one of the authors.
Yeah, congratulations. Yeah, sorry. I thought you were. I wasn't quite sure. But for those who aren't, you did a great job of that. So it's a nice framework. I was just going to say, there's kind of a before COVID, this was not impossible. There were ways of doing this that we all stumbled through, I think. And now, so I think a careful analysis of how, if you're a laboratory director, how do you, in a very practical way, go about setting this up in a compliant way for your pathologists? So I think I guess what I'm arguing for is a very pragmatic approach of what to do, how to do it. And as Joe said, maybe identifying some of the areas of ambiguity or where we need to fill it in.
Kevin, do you want to comment?
Sorry, I got distracted for the last 30 seconds.
No, just, CAP rollout validation of digital path under clear waiver during the public health emergency or versus later. I know you've done some of that work and have a lot of experience, so I don't know.
So the CAP is very interested in this particular topic. I'm I'm sort of limited into what I can say about what actions we're taking around it at this point. I'm assuming everyone can read between the lines of what I just said there without me being any more specific. And unfortunately, that's where I have to stop.
Yeah, so let's just say that this is not intended to replace, but more supplement or act complementary to any of the other, efforts. I know ADASP, ASCP, probably AMP, a lot of people will issue, position statements, likely letters, either for or against this. I would consider this effort here from this group mostly clarifying and helping to navigate people who may have not had a lot of exposure to these regulatory aspects. And secondary, to many of the industry representatives or stakeholders, that may be something that they have heard of but never really practically encountered. And so I would consider that maybe a resource so that, after those meetings, maybe there's a letter, maybe there's a publication or a short opinion piece that comes out of it, but that's optional. I think we just want to help clarify why this is such a complicated topic, because to many it's like, well, just do telemedicine. Everyone does it, right? But it's a little more complicated when it goes about who can diagnose cancer where and under what regulatory framework, because eventually someone has to take, the accountability and, be responsible for that. And in case something goes wrong, there's like legal and, real consequences. So I don't know. That's sort of the scope. Other comments? Yeah.
Question. I'm gonna admit some naivety in this. So I'm just gonna say some stuff, and people might laugh because I should know it, but I don't necessarily fully grasp it. But can somebody help? Because this sort of came up with John's question, or maybe Mark's, about accreditation versus credentialing. And I always thought with credentialing, in my mind, I think of competency as being embedded in that versus accreditation, which may not be, maybe more process-like. But that sort of helps clarify about what's the scope of the regs. You know, CMS obviously can't really do practice of medicine, but you know, it's possible for, like, let's say CAP to handle that aspect in terms of competency. And so this is maybe where CAP can go further than CMS can. So there might be some distinction. Everybody's been using, you know, organizations as proxies, but maybe that doesn't necessarily have to be that way. You know, and so from there we can actually navigate about, you know, the practice, and then validation, all these different things, you know. And so it sort of starts with coming up with definitions of these concepts out there. And I just wanted to start with those two because it helps frame certain things in my mind, because I should know and I don't, or maybe not as well as I should.
I don't know, the typical distinction is that accreditations are administered through third parties of the government acting on their behalf using very specific rule sets, versus certifications or credentialing depends on the context. So you're credentialed with the hospital, with your institution, with a subspecialty, with a board. So that's, you know, some of those. It's somewhat overlapping with certifications. And then, of course, you know, when it comes to licensure, you know, like, does a licensure, for example, is that a requirement for credentialing or not? And then, you know, the accreditation agency may want to see verification of you being credentialed and competent and licensed. So these are, you know, depending on what you look for, interrelated concepts. But I would definitely be interested to hear what people are saying about this.
These are deep concepts for a holiday. The reason why I also bring it up, I think Joe and we're all touching upon, is why this is important, is that, you know, it depends on how you define what's a lab test, what's the practice of medicine. You know, competency kind of gets into that realm, and knowing which is where competency fits in versus just the process itself. You know, you can separate that out with different regs for just the process versus the practice of medicine. So if you incorporate AI, there might be some competency involved in that too. And that's not necessarily the same thing as a lab. Well, depends on how you define a lab test and who interprets it and stuff. But it really makes your head hurt when you start thinking about, you know, where does a certain reg end and something begins? Mm-hmm. And that's why we have to agree on these definitions and maybe finally solidify, clarify that when we say something, you know, this is what we mean.
All right. So I think I take this, despite very few comments, as general interest of the group. So let's just schedule something. We blast out the invites, we set the dates, you know, and typically, you know, early afternoon, but we have to move on. I saw Laura pop on. Laura, do you want to provide a brief overview of the ISPOR panel? Maybe she just stepped away.
I didn't have a chance to read over.
Sorry, Joe, I was double muted, but go ahead. Joe, you should tell it.
Well, I'm a little disadvantaged. I think I was paying attention to the listserv blowing up, trying to wrap my head around some of these concepts, but I didn't have a chance to read the draft. But this is my understanding of the ISPOR, that in some ways, this is a group that's a mover and shaker in terms of trying to help with policy and maybe certain things about health economics and such. And so we had floated this topic several times, and it actually made it in the CAP today about a national patient identifier versus national patient identification. And so we float around a couple mechanisms for making that happen. There's a lot of herding the cats in terms of making something like this being brought forth in the conversation and making it happen. But this is a way to raise light about different ways to navigate that, how to make something like that happen. So as part of it was that, you know, can we submit something to present in front of these movers and shakers about, well, the needs there. And I think the question is also the how to make that happen without you know, I don't know, something that's technically feasible, won't break the bank, is still doesn't really shake up a lot of different stakeholders that don't necessarily want to move. So there's a lot of different things at play. So I guess, so basically it's tying in all of our conversations prior about how to create a national patient identification mechanism. I brought forth this tokenization mechanism, happy to present some of the high level aspects of that and to see if it sticks with this group.
So I thought it was fantastic because it came, also up. Laura, PharmD, do you want to briefly provide how you got involved there?
Sorry, did you call it me, Jeff? I'm sorry. So I thought it was a good venue to sort of highlight this topic, simply because for those of you who aren't familiar with this core, Joe did a good job of describing them. They also publish Health Affairs, which is a journal that is widely viewed in the health policy circles. And so if this is something that is interesting to push from the policy perspective, that's a really good way to get in front of regulators and policymakers about this concept as well. And the panel format it is for is really to bring up topics that might be a little bit more controversial or contentious because there's lots of moving parts involved. And so this should, I would think, elevate to the level of what they deem as meriting a panel discussion, and get us in the right front of the right people, from regulators and industry reps and data groups and all the way to health tech assessment organizations that all are interested in using data and the corresponding policies that go with them. So that was sort of why I proposed it, having been part of some of those discussions about the federated identity model previously. That kind of popped into my head as a good topic for that discussion. And ISPOR will be held in Washington, D.C. next year. So if we are interested in having a discussion with policymakers and regulators, it's a great opportunity to do so. So that's my pitch. Joe and Joe both have a draft of an abstract that I threw together very quickly, and we'll be working on it. So if anybody's interested, please let one of us know. And I think the deadline is December 15th of this year to get the abstract in. So coming up quickly, but I think it's worth a shot.
I think so too. And I think it is, the tokenization proposal from Joe raises all the important points because it touches upon, technical possibility, feasibility, probably, some of the, deadlocks that some healthcare institutions are in, either be it with electronic health records or just data exchange, right? Because that IT problem of identity is clear. And I think a big element here is, of course, diversity, which is one of those ISPOR focus areas. We can tackle that as well. So if there are no objections, we make that a project as well. And then if you're interested, just shoot an email. It will end up with Ula, and then we schedule a meeting to work on the abstract. So that would likely happen in the next couple of days, so that we can get a decent abstract with good representation from this group forward. Thanks a lot, Laura and Joe, for thinking of this group, and this will definitely raise some attention.
Thanks a lot for bringing that up.
Awesome. We had proposed at the October meeting a proposal to compare, and we put here LDT versus IVDR, but there's also the interest of some people that replied and saying, like, it's not only, IVDR, there's also like, what is the difference between FDA and IVDR or any regulatory, umbrella, and what would that entail? So we will schedule a meeting. This is mostly the announcement. There is definitely enough interest to do sort of a hands-on, how to compare this, how can you align. We know that many of the industry stakeholders replied, because of course, if you have a global strategy, that will likely entail, regulatory submissions towards the FDA, but also to, other jurisdictions, i.e. IVDR in Europe. So this is mostly an announcement that we have to do this. One quick shout out, if you have not done or want to, there is a new draft document called Content of Pre-Market Submissions for Device Software Functions, which is part of, the entire slew of documents related to software as a medical device. And I just wanted to quickly give a shout out that the submission of comment period is 2/2/22. Easy to remember, and the document itself is a draft guidance that has been published November 4th. So please take a look. There's some very important figures, diagrams, and concepts in there that I think will raise a few questions, but also clarify how the FDA is thinking about this right now. So this is mostly for information. If you haven't seen it, we provide the links to the document, but you can also just type this into Google and you will find it immediately on the agency's website.
Can I ask a question about that? Will this actually tie in with maybe what's currently going on Capitol Hill with the Violac and the Ballot Act? Will this sort of tie into that, or will it, in terms of how they propose something which might be controversial?
So under both acts, one doesn't mention software. The other one definitely includes software, would be considered included, but that's more legislative. I think this is a draft guidance that would go into effect after the usual comment period and then the internal review revision, and then this is likely going to be existent irrespective of any upcoming legislation. But that's just my understanding of the situation. Whether or not software as a medical device will be completely included under, for example, Valid or under Vital, that's a separate discussion. So, once, even if the legislation would go live, that has to be then first equipped with appropriate, guidances for, going into effect. So,
yeah, that was my question, because if this were to be modified, would there be an opportunity for that to influence either acts, just because the way this is framed? I didn't know if it had any influence at all, but it seems like they're just completely separate.
I think those are separate. At least, I don't know, other people can comment, but I believe that this, let's call it, this is one part of the SAMD guidances, so there are many documents, and this is just a principal outline of what will need to go into a pre-market submission. And so I'm about halfway through, and there's many concepts, risk assessments, design qualifiers, specific wordings. It's kind of like a dictionary of how the FDA would want things. But if there's more interest, of course, we could make that a separate project. But I think if you read through the final comments or the comments that are submitted online, that will probably be influential. But this affects not only digital pathology, right, or pathology. This is for all SAMD. I don't know, Brandon, if you can make a quick comment here, but this.
Yeah, I think this is more of the day-to-day operations, whereas those ballot acts and other acts are huge policy and law stuff.
Mm-hmm. All right, couple of quick shout outs. First, I don't know, Ulla, if you have the link to the video, we can paste it in the chat. It's also in the document update that I think is in the chat if you arrived early. Bruce Quinn is a policy expert, pathologist by training. He has put out a video explaining the specific CMS rules coming out for calendar year 22 about reimbursement for AI algorithms. An extremely complicated, multi-100-page document that defines cost criteria. The two quick things I want to mention here is the reimbursement rate for inpatient DRG is 65% of the total, and there are specific products that have been approved, and you can take a look at this video. We provide that in the link. So in other words, as a quick summary, take a look at this if you're interested in AI reimbursement. It's starting to happen, and it's a very complicated topic. We can't cover this in any more detail here, but we provide this as a resource on the website. And if there's further interest, just shoot us an email. I'm sure Bruce would be delighted to also join a project. There was a brief section on the page prostate and FDA approval related, to the assistance of prostate cancer detection in laboratory economics. So that's a quick shout out to that issue. So that is something, if you haven't seen it, take a look. We provide a quick machine learning cheat sheet. It's a multi-page document from a Illustris group. If you haven't seen that, take a look. So these are just sort of quick shout outs to papers, etc. If you are helping with biomarkers or trial design, or if you're in industry using digital pathology for that, there was a recent Cell, that's a top-notch, basic science journal, illustrating that master interventional trials, which I'm sure many of you have heard the terms umbrella trial and basket trial, and this is related to predictive versus prognostic versus master observational trials, but it's also things like real-world data. They have carefully constructed this. This takes an hour to read through. It's very intricate, but it's an amazing framework to make sure that we use the same words for the same things. And of course, everyone heard of a randomized controlled clinical trial, but if it's interventional and prospective and double-blinded, the question is, how do biomarkers come into play? So if you haven't seen this, this is literally a 2-pager, and it's amazing. So we provide that. Quickly moving forward, the importance of data sharing and international policies and standards has been tackled by the GA4GH group. First author Heidi Rehm. This author list continues on about 16 pages. This is a massive document in cell genomics. I just wanted to briefly point that out because data sharing will, of course, be a key issue. So I just want to put a brief hint out there. Maybe one of the next projects for 2022 for PIcc could be that we tackle this problem, but not for genomic research in healthcare, but for digital pathology. And that's kind of like a call to action. I presume many of you have thought about this already. I know we received a few emails, but this is a fantastic blueprint, and please take a look and think about it if you have some time over the holidays or so. We definitely come back to that. 3 more quick shout outs for publications. One is from the group of Catherine Phillips. We discussed some of these components in the payer and one reimbursement meeting we had. This is published in Genetics and Medicine, and it illustrates different laboratory business models and practices. So again, quick shout out. One beautiful paper from Hamid about whether AI can remove some observer variability in pathology. This was in the American Journal of Pathology. And then this one here is more for the industry stakeholders. This is a Nature Reviews and Drug Discovery. Beautiful review of the clinical development times all the way to market authorization by the FDA for a whole set of innovative drugs. This entails immunotherapies as well as targeted therapies. Final paper, and then we move on to interactive components, is this one here from the group around Joel Hedlund. And this is a way or the paper describes how you present your AI data in a succinct way, including a checklist that goes all the way to what you recommend writing in the introduction and the methods and the results, etc. So please take a look here. They used a non-pathology example, but that doesn't matter. It's a phenomenal outline. And here's one, quick overview of that. All right, we move forward. A few updates. I think Jitesh, who is on the call, wanted to provide a brief update from NDIC. Let's start with that. Would that work, Jitesh? This is a good time.
That will work. Oh, I cannot share screen. It says host disabled the participant screen sharing. I can explain, with our screen sharing. So I heard Joe highlighting in a couple of initial updates that a lot of discussion about the SAMD, RW, and so One of the most important or most relevant activity happening right now at NDIC is the digital health vertical, which is co-chaired by Bakul Patel and Casey Shearer from Medtronic. What we are trying to do is to leverage the learning from the preset program. Currently, we have established 6 work streams. The first one is about change control, and then we have 3 subgroups or 3 sub work streams in that. And then we have a specific work stream on PMA software changes, and then another one in updates and patches. So there are 6 work streams already kicked off, and we have not, NDIC, we have not restricted the participation in these work streams just to NDIC members, so it's kind of open. Of course, the steering committee is exclusive to NDIC, but for the work streams, which I mentioned, 6 of them right now, is available widely to diagnostics and device manufacturers who are interested in this field. And the group is also contemplating contemplating 2 other work streams. One is RWE in digital health, as well as software labeling. So the 5 of them are listed. 6 of them are listed here. Actually, the first one will be 1A, 1B, and 1C. Then remaining will be 2, 3, 4, 5. 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6. And then the last one, RWD, we have not kicked off the calls yet. It's brainstorming, and then software labeling is not mentioned here. That's another one. So we'll have almost 8 work streams related to the preset programs and SAMD, SIMD in the next couple of, 5 of them or 6 of them already started. So if you think you're an SME from industry, device or diagnostics, it doesn't matter, or digital health side, you should either send a note to Joe, Rula, or myself, so that we can include you in the appropriate work streams. Again, we won't work on the policy, but we are working on the regulatory side and the frameworks and related activities based off preset and related programs. That's the main update relevant to this group. And the second thing I wanted to share with the group is MDIC, we have our board meetings every quarter. The last one for this year is on December 16th. And I know there are 9 working groups here at PIcc. And if you think there is a call of action which you want to widely disseminate through MDIC board of director level, please send a note to Ula, Joe, or myself, so that we can include that in the board updates, because I don't really follow all the individual action items from the 9 working groups. It is too much. But if you think some of them are really relevant and you need more wider dissemination, please do feel free to connect with me, Joe, or Ola. And I think somebody was asking about the links to the work streams. We just kickstarted. We have only the brief description in the website. And in most of the cases, MDIC, during the MDIC work time period, you won't see a lot of updates in the website, because the frameworks and those things, it's a collective process and it's an ongoing process. We won't update as much on the website, but once you are included in the group, you'll have regular calls and updates, and you will be able to learn and contribute. So I'll stop with that and yield my remaining time to Joe for if there are questions.
Thanks a lot, Jitesh. I think these the real-world evidence work stream, I think, would be amazing to align that with the CLIA waiver group. Maybe not the initial meeting, but I think, having additional support on, what real-world evidence looks like, I could see that would be something that we could possibly align. Yeah,
and as some of you might have heard that MDIC also have a health economics and patient value HCPV working group. In addition to the NEST, they're all kind of interested in the post-market strategy, real-world strategy, as well as reimbursement strategy. And again, we don't want to duplicate the work, or we wanted to avoid the redundancy in all the possible ways. So any chance of synergy or synergizing with other groups, as Joe mentioned, we would love to do that, so that if there's a group and a person or a liaison to sit in that in our working groups, that will be super helpful, so that we can advise each other.
And can we do it again, like just like last year, to provide like a brief PowerPoint as an update for the NDIC board meeting?
Yes.
So okay, perfect. So I can hand that over to the entire team. So if you have an update from your work streams and or projects, just send that to Ulla and we compile it and report back to our convener, NDIC. And again, thanks a lot for all the support. And so that's amazing. Let me just see. So next update would be Brandon from the Truthing and Validation group. Is that correct?
Okay. Anyhow, the link to this updates page is in the PIcc kind of agenda. And I just wanted to point out a couple of things. After a year and 4 months of, I don't know why, our original overview paper has been published about the project. So I wanted to make sure that was announced. And then I wanted to definitely announce this work that's happening. This one. We've had some sessions with pathologists looking at the TILS evaluations and discussing and talking about the instructions and guidelines for what pathologists should be doing. And we're writing it up for the cancer special issue on tumor infiltrating lymphocytes in solid tumors. And we're happy to share a pre-submission draft and get feedback from any clinicians that want to see what words we're using and how we're framing those guidelines. Another thing that's coming and that I'm happy to share ahead of time is a correspondence to Nature Machine Intelligence. Just kind of a highlights of ways that FDA is engaging with the external folks and collaborations and things like this collaborative community. The other thing I wanted to mention is an offer is we have a catalog of regulatory science tools, OSO, the office that I'm in. It's mainly a list of manuscripts and a few software databases and things like that. And we're upgrading that to be a little more useful, so that when you find a topic or a tool that sounds interesting, you can get more information in like a 1-page or 2-page document. And so my software tool has that new template that we've drafted, and I'd like to see if I can get any feedback on whether that overview of the tool is useful, the categories that we have in that. So those are the things that I really wanted to call out, because they are kind of trying to open the door to get feedback. But there's several other things related to data collection and some other things that we put out there, getting ready for conferences and developing other deliverables. So if you check this out and you have any questions, you can let me know.
Perfect. No, thanks a lot. I believe, peer-reviewed publications are always great. It's, tangibles. It's really important also, to get the word out. And fantastic. Thanks for sharing this.
The reason I'm here is to try and get more expertise to weigh in.
It's awesome. No, it's like, there's science on the one and the other side of the proverbial wall between agency and outside. And, we're one of the groups that tries to poke a couple of holes in there and collaborate more. Speaking of progressive things, Julia, do you want to provide a brief overview of the trainees group?
Yeah, hey everyone, I just have a quick update. We had on Monday our third speaker event with Siba El-Hussein from the University of Rochester in New York. The link should be in the chat right now, so please feel free to go back to the website and review our meeting. It was a great session about how to start a project on an example of AI tools and how to build an AI algorithm in hematopathology. So it was a great meeting. Please feel free to check it out online.
Thanks a lot for moving the field forward, also for the various trainees. I think that's really important. All right, a few more updates and a few more discussion points. One thing that is definitely happening, I think December 3rd, I don't see this confirmed yet, but I think so. CIP experts will review those final regulations. This came up in one of the discussions. Let me just share this here, just so we have this on screen as well. So CIP is, of course, very active on numerous fronts. One part here is the quality payment program. And if you combine this slide with the video from Bruce Quinn, it will hopefully make sense. So if you are interested in that, like, please join. And CIP is doing a great job on this part. All right. One of the two topics we need to discuss with this group is a membership meeting. Format, etc., is of course a discussion. One of the last meetings in that case in person, as well as with the data collection event, was UseCap 2 years ago. So one of the questions here is, should we have one? How could it be near UseCap, close to UseCap, or virtual? So I wanted to open this up for discussion, across the various stakeholders here.
Well, I'll just volunteer that we have not yet in any travel mode besides mission critical. But it is loosening up there. For example, management, certain select management are now supposedly on campus, and they are talking and preparing us to be starting to be ready for some of those movements to be on campus.
So maybe the fastest, because it's a very quiet group today, is if we just do a survey across, the membership and see what we get back in terms of feedback or other opinions, ideas, suggestions. Okay, and then the second.
If we do it, we can pretend the last 2 years didn't even happen.
Okay.
Because that's about when everything shut down 2 years before. Just erase it all and start like it never, none of that happened.
If I finally invent time traveling, I go back to the bar back at that meeting after the data collection event, and then we start over. I like that idea. Mm-hmm. But we learned a lot, so let's not erase all of it. And then one question here that's much more concrete. Our next meeting, which usually is at the end of every month, would fall on Wednesday, December 29th. And people have asked, should we move that up to December 22nd? Or because then some people suggested, I'm already on holiday break then. So what are sort of the preferences? If you feel like not like talking today, you can also put it in the chat. Skip 22 or 29. That's like 4, 2, or 2 letters. Type it in the chat right now, and we can, figure out what people's preference is. Of course, I know everyone loves working between the holidays, because that's usually when you get stuff done. Yeah, we see some. All right. Cool. So as this is moving on, I think we can now move to the happy hour part of this meeting. Open it up for discussion, maybe free brainstorming is more illustrious. And then, if you have the drink of your choice in front of you, we should, start celebrating Thanksgiving here. Other topics, questions, recommendations, wishes? Should we stop the recording, Ulla, and then people may